Hello everybody, welcome back to our workshops on the Bach cello suites on Vito Žuraj. I am Jean-Guihen Queyras, very happy that you are back with us. And tonight we will talk about the Gavottes from the fifth suite. And my guest, yes, it seems to be working this time around, will be Vito Žuraj, composer. I'm saying this because some of you who follow it on social media and everything, we had Vito was supposed to be with us in December in one episode, and we had a little technical misunderstanding with Adagio, and then this episode had to be postponed. So Vito is back with us today, and I look forward to ask him about what he thinks of Bach, of the cello, all these things that we have been dealing with here. I will start with a question from Davis, who lives in Munich. And he sent me a question for today's workshop. Hey, Jean. You know, some people call me Jean because Jean-Guihen is sometimes a bit complicated. Hope you are doing all right. I actually wanted to ask you thoughts about tempo relations between both gavottes, and if the contrast after the sarabande should be bright or kept dark. Thank you and all the best. So, thank you for your question, dear Davis. Basically, there are two questions in one here. And I will start with the transition from the sarabande. So, you know that I like to put things in context. And so let me just quickly remind where we are in the fifth suite when we are about to play the gavotte. We started with our very stormy prelude. Oh, about which I have to make a little digression. I will be right back to where we were, but today I was teaching my student Caroline on this prelude, and I am so ashamed. That shows you how I didn't go enough into looking into the manuscript of Anna Magdalena. But in Anna Magdalena's manuscript, there is no natural in front of the A and in front of the A flat. So therefore it's a A flat. So my whole life I've been, because it's in the edition of Bernreiter, at least in the former edition of Bernreiter, it's A natural, and on most editions, and most cellists play that. And I didn't question it. So, and you know what? I find So, let's go back to where we were. The character, a very stormy beginning, very rhythmical, a fugue that finishes. So a lot of energy created to finish with this tierce picard on the last chord, an allemande which is still in these French rhythms, and so therefore dotted rhythms and a lot of ornaments. So inevitably, because of the dotted rhythms, we have something which is I wouldn't dare to say tormented, but at least animated, with a lot of anima. And then we come to this very stormy courante, which is very short, very concentrated, and again quite dark in its color. And from there we have this first, I would say, quite spectacular contrast and systemic change, because through all of this energy we land in something which is timelessness and without gravity, in a way. I mean gravity in the sense of the physical aspect. very famous sarabande, which, as I said, as mentioned last week, I think is really the keystone in terms of the grammatic, the arch of the sixth suite. So the question is, where do we go from there? And now I get to your question, dear Davis. I think that the gavotte that we have here, even though it has a lot of chords, but it has something incredibly benevolent, something like if Bach was consoling us after all the drama and then sort of no immateriality of the sarabande. So and then we come back to life. But I find in a very well. Let me play the first bar. But I think it has something. So I think it has something very gentle, very soothing, which is why I mentioned it in the title. If you saw it on the Adagio app. So. Therefore, and to finish on this subject of the transition and of the character of this suite, for me, again, one last time I promise, I want to repeat that for me, the sarabande is where everything leads from the first suite. The sarabande of the fifth suite is this sort of keystone, and then there is a before and an after this sarabande. That I am absolutely aware this is very subjective, but this is how I have already for many years felt very strongly, and therefore that the intensity is accumulating until the courante of this fifth suite, and then we have this sarabande, which sort of puts everything in question, and after that we are changed. We are other human beings after, like a sort of after having an experience of going beyond something. So this is I'm absolutely aware I'm putting a lot of my own subjectivity in there. Now, therefore, before I go to your second part of your question, dear Davis, the temporal relation between the gavottes, I'll get there when I get to the second gavotte. I think there is this one, in terms of the tempo, it cannot be, because of all these chords that we have, it cannot be a very fast one. So our pulse is this 1 1 and 1 2 1 and 1 again. You know what, I think today I want to again make a fool of myself and dance for you about these sort of 2-bar structures added, I mean 2 bars plus 2 bars, because I've been talking about the structures and the importance of these structures in basically each of my episodes, but again there was another lesson I was giving this morning to my other student Constantine, and again we talked about the importance of physically feeling not only the music but already first of all the steps and the structure. So when I talk about structures, about bar structures, it's not something abstract, it's not something mathematical, it's something physical, and it has to be. So please bear with me as I will show you how. Let me see if I see myself from the. Yes, okay. So it would be no step. So we have really 1 2 1 and 1 2 1. And why is this so important? Because that's the breathing of this gavotte, and the risk, if you don't have this really anchored in you before playing this music, the risk is that with all this chord is going to get very beaty, and each beat being the same, and then you will lack the curve and therefore the phrasing. The first thing that I find already very tender and very touching, moving, is that our first arrival point, the downbeat of the second bar, this arrival point, is the first one that doesn't have a chord. And remember, this is a way for Bach to emphasize a bit in a different way, with let's call it sensibility, as though the rest was not with sensibility, but you know what I mean. So we have this E flat there, which we don't play. And I think immediately you want to give it some more attention. I can't avoid it. And then, of course, the next cycle of two bars, he will, on the contrary, all the steps are without chords, and the final chord, the corresponding to the one which was without chord, the final arrival point of this second structure of two bars has a big chord. So that we already have all the elements that help us to feel that it's going to be N1 to 1, N1 to 1, that it's going to be a different feeling, which is exactly what we want. So let me play the whole thing again. Yeah. And from there, we will go now in a very gentle way by arpeggiating all the harmonies by two notes. That means in the next at least 4 bars, absolutely no chords, only gentle eighth notes that describe the harmony. So needless to say, all of these are chords which are arpeggiated. So if I so these are our chords, but the fact that they are and then for the final stretch, again, many chords, everything harmonized. So a very active bass in the last 4 bars to sort of conclude this first part. What I like very much here is again the absence of bass on one downbeat just before the very final cadence, and that makes the whole difference. And that's so genius. Then again, so we had some modulation here to bring us to F minor, and then again an episode without double stops. And then he really goes for it by having a very active bass, harmonized. That means many chords. So a lot of chords. By the way, here I make a little technical parenthesis for my cellist friends out there. As you notice, I do not hesitate to arpeggiate a lot the chords, and I cannot encourage you enough to do so as well, for 2 reasons. The number one is that we have long now in these workshops discovered the quality, the advantages of virtuality. In this case, yes, this is a chord, this is 3 notes, but actually if I if I do this, you don't like the three notes together, you don't get as much a sense of a chord as when you hear them actually, technically speaking, right after another. Anyway, it's a lute piece. This one, he probably thought of the lute when he was composing it. So he already, or maybe that's when he was composing this one that he thought, oh, I should do a version for the lute, which he did. So that's one thing, that the technically non-simultaneous playing of all these notes doesn't mean that people will not hear it as a chord. That's the first thing. And the other thing is that paradoxically you will be able to give more a sense of pulse if you arpeggiate, because then you can really decide, and most of the time your pulse should be on the top of the chord. So when you reach the top of your arpeggiando, you can really give a sense of pulse, which is again in this danced music very, very, very important. There are I stay in my little technical aspect now for 20 more seconds, because I think in 90% of the cases it's good to reach your pulse when you're on top of the chord. When there are some technical aspects that makes this difficult, or maybe in some cases impossible, then you will have to accept to do it differently. In the little cadenza at the end of the first part that we just played before, there is this chord that we don't like with cellists. This chord here, where we have a barré with the fourth finger, and then the A string. And for most of us, and for me for sure, it's impossible to actually to have all three notes really played, ready to play at the same time, because when I do the barré with the fourth finger, I touch the A string and I cannot play. So therefore I have to leave these notes before I reach the A string. So, and therefore well, I also reach my pulse on the top, but instead of doing a regular arpeggio, I count. There is a constraint of my physiology and the instrument I play. Therefore, I really play a fifth as an upbeat, before the beat, and we will see at the end of the second part there are at least two of this chord, or maybe more, or maybe three in a row. And so we have to, three times in a row it comes at the end. I'm just seeing now. So we have to make arrangements with the difficulties that the composer gives us. So we reached A flat major. So again, a little change for the first time by Bach is that he could very well have put like this. So which would have been the normal path that my bass does this. Instead of that, he wants to create a longer phrase. He doesn't do this usual pattern. He delays the bass to the last beat. No bass now, because he wants the line to go on. He wants us to know, oh, that's unstable, that's not normal, so probably it's not finished. And indeed, the chromatic goes on to reach this very important G, which is our dominant, and we are going to be on this pedal note, on this Orgelpunkt in German, for a long time, with a beautiful and nostalgic downward line of both soprano and middle voices answering each other. And then we come to the last stretch where there are a lot of chords and a lot of these difficult chords I was talking about. And we finish this. The Gavotte 2, you remember all these movements with the double, like the minuets in the first two suites, the bourrées in the suite 3 and 4, and now in suite 5 and 6, the Gavottes have a double. And of course, all this idea of double is the duality. How do I play the contrast between the two parts? And you remember that only in the first two suites, he uses, for example, a change of key, major to minor, minor to major. He doesn't do it, he still does it in the bourrée of the third suite, but from the fourth suite, he doesn't do it anymore. And here, so what do we have in this first gavotte? We have a lot of chords, remember? So, which gives us, you know, these steps of the chords, of the bass lines are actually very present in a way, and give this groove. And then he will, in the Gavotte 2, he does the contrary. Absolutely no double stop, no chords, and a lot of line. It's very linear. So a few things I want to say at this point is that, first of all, I will answer Davis's question about the tempo relation. You know, it's not even that I try to constrain myself to keep the same tempo. For example, when we get to the Gavottes of the sixth suite, I change the tempo quite radically, and I will explain why when we get there. But here, I actually don't need, so... I feel sort of that the same tempo really fits this movement also very well. So there is something about these ternary rhythms, these triplets, that are going to be the whole way through this Gavotte 2, which is, I feel, well, this rhythm itself, this motive itself, and with this motive, which turns around itself, around the note of G. So we are not going anywhere, right? We are sort of, and then we, and then. So each time we come back to this motive, which is a sort of, I experienced it a bit like a question. In the beginning of the second part, we have the same motif in E flat major. So still this thing turning around itself. Now a third above our original on B flat. Again. Now we have a dialogue between two voices. So for a moment, this upper voice was sort of stuck on the same, and you recognize that again this motif turning around itself. It's our main motif for this Gavotte 2, and now we're going to, out of this motif, Bach creates a dialogue with two voices. The lower voice is very active, is the one that tries to find a way out. Our motif shortly before the end. What a music, huh? What a music. I mean, we are so lucky. This is such a generous and a tender. There is incredible tenderness in this music. That's how I experience it. All right. Dear friends, enough talking. It's the time for our guest of tonight, composer Vito Žuraj. Lieber Vito, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, here you are, and I see you as well. Perfect, fantastic. Dear Vito, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I know that you have been busy lately for a very good reason, because you are actually working on the new cello concerto, which I am so excited to premiere. Hopefully, we don't know yet, maybe in March in Berlin, or if we postpone it because of COVID, but it will come, the day will come, and I'm already very excited about this. Vito, when we were talking about this in preparation a little bit of this episode, you told me actually Bach has been super important in your life very early on. Bach was at the center of your musical life for a very long time already, no?
Yes, that's true. It is still time when I was playing cello actively. I played it only for 6 years, so I'm anything but virtuoso. But I was just listening a lot, especially to suites, and played some of the very easy to play movements. And then I think it was like I was like 10 or 11 years old. So when I decided to compose for cello back then, of course, first pieces would sound something like Bach, not not nearly as good, but trying to imitate some gestures and like in stile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So because you are mainly a pianist, but you play the cello as well, no?
Yes, I played for a very short time, but I mainly if I would like to play something for you, I would use the piano.
Yes. We had this interesting discussion as well, where, and that embarrassed me a little bit, where we were trying to find amongst the great composers, the ones so I'm not talking about cellists who are composing like Davidoff and like Popper. And Popper did some great pieces, repertoire for cello. He's just like one of these. It was in this tradition of the great virtuosos who were also able to compose very, very interesting, very interesting pieces. But amongst the great composers through the history, it's quite rare to meet one who is actually a cellist, and that frustrated me when we were trying to find one, you and I, and we actually again and again came back to the fact that most of these composers are played a harmonic instrument. I mean, like most of them, a keyboard, no?
Yes, exactly. Like Dvorak, Strauss, of course, and people who played keyboards, and it's. I think it's not only for cello. I think for composer it's important to know all the instruments, and then if a especially good idea comes, then as a composer, just feel you have to use the instrument. With cello or trumpets or flute, just express yourself through different media. So it's hard to say that it is important to be a virtuoso on a specific instrument to actually write something special for this instrument. Some composers did that, like Paganini. That there are many composers who lived after Paganini and composed pieces which were like variations on a theme by Paganini, which is a great credit to the composer Paganini. But it is one part of the truth.
I see there are. It's so interesting. You know, I feel so lucky that I've been able to work with so many composers in my years. For of course, starting with Intercontemporain back then, but also since then, and there are some very different ways to compose. There are two things that strike me, dear Vito, with you is that. First of all, that you do need to get to the instrument in order to compose for it. Well, anyway, you have played some cello, but my sense is that somehow, if you will compose, I think you composed like a horn concerto, if I remember well, right, or something like this. Yeah, probably you did take the horn and you tried on it. I mean, you need to feel physically the instrument for which to compose. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. I need. One part is to touch the instrument, to actually work on an instrument. But actually, even more important for me is to work with a musician who plays that instrument. Yes, Jean-Guihen, of course, to work with you intensively when I'm composing a cello concerto for you. But
yes.
For any other instruments as well. But even if I cannot play it, just to get in contact to see what is the effort to play it, what is special, to work with the musician especially. For me, every musician is like a piece of gold, like a gem who has played the instrument for many decades, and just like the person who grew with the instrument together in some higher form of a being, and then beautiful things can happen, and I'm very inspired by that.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to mention to our viewers, that Vito came to my place already. I would say probably almost 2 years ago. You started to get in touch and say, "Okay, I'm coming to Freiburg. can we work?" I was like, "Hey, wow! The concert is in 3 years, you know, I see, or 2.5 years," and I was very impressed. And so, is it that you want to try to find maybe some, because we all performers, we all have our own idiomatics, or some ways to phrase, some way to breathe the music. Do you want to incorporate that in your composition, would you say?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because the instrument itself is just an object, and it is being given life by the interpreter, and every interpreter has his own approaches to the instrument. And especially you, who played so many contemporary music as well, knows so many different pieces and has so many advices, which score to take a look at, which sound of a cello might seem interested, and these are aspects which gave me a lot of input.
But then, on the other hand, you don't just stop there by taking from your interpreter. Do you think, Vito, would you allow me to show our viewer one playing technique that you invented while researching for this concerto? So the last visit I had from Vito was you were here just last week,
exactly.
very, very recently, exactly. And you brought me a gift. And this gift is a big box of Faber-Castell. We are making now some publicity of these big pencils with, very important, and you will see why now, with these little, how is it called in English? These little knobs. Knobs, which are originally, it's just so that you can grip your pencil better, you know. But for Vito, there is another use that I'm going to show. I have to take off my headphones for a second. And Vito, I didn't practice yet, so it's not going to be perfect and like in your concerto. But so at some point during your concerto, I will have to put down my bow and take this in my right hand. You see, I cut this in order to not endanger the cello. I cut the tip of the pencil, and here is what I have to do. So I hope, yeah, people can see. So I have to mute the strings here like this, and then use these knobs here to that's a very primitive demonstration of something that you have developed in the concerto, and which is and I'm fascinated to see. Oh yes, there are still ways to make our instrument sound like something else, and it's very 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 exciting. That's yeah. Well, dear Vito, I think we have to leave the room because there will be a concert soon now on the same platform. Thank you so much for taking the time, dear Vito, and I look forward to keeping working on your concerto. We will keep you posted out there for about this project on social media, on Vito's social media and on mine. And I will see you in 2 weeks, dear followers of these workshops. Next week I won't be able to do a workshop, but so in 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks we will conclude the fifth suite with the jig. And before entering our very last suite, our sixth suite, so which I must say, you know, now that I see the sixth suite coming, I'm starting to think, oh, this will actually come to an end at some point, and I don't know if I can really how do you say, renounce on being in touch with all of you out there, and because I get more and more feedbacks, which by the way are very very moving every time, and I'm so happy that this seems to be meaningful for quite a few of you out there, and therefore I've already started to think about how this adventure could continue with other repertoires in other forms, and like we have done until now with all your questions and inputs. If you have your own wishes, your own ideas, how we could go on once we have finished the Bach cycle, just let me know. It will be a pleasure to see if I can do that. All the best, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you in 2 weeks. And Vito, thank you again.
Thank you for inviting me. Bye bye.